This is how I use shutter speed to control the outcome of my action sports photos. Let's take a look at a few examples. Generally, I find that 1/1250th of a second is a good, safe speed for my shutter for most of my photography. As you can take a look at this image here of my friend Micah, I shot this image super low. It's really crisp, and the 1/1250th of a second makes the water nice and crisp. You can actually see the water droplet rings right here on the lip of the wave. Micah is very much so in focus, looks great. The lighting in this situation was a little tricky because it wasn't quite sunset time, but it was still a little bit in the afternoon, so the angle of the sun did make it a little bit hard to shoot, but overall, outstanding quality image here. The next scenario that I want to look at is an image of Jeff Hubbard. He's one of my close friends here on Oahu, and I remember this shot very specifically. It was actually pretty recently. It was a very sunny morning, so we did have to be very concerned about the highlights. As you can see right in here, they are just about blown out, but thankfully my shutter speed was high enough. I shot this image at 1/2000th of a second. The reason why I opted to bump up the shutter speed was because of the light. In general, I like to shoot with a more wide open aperture, so in order to compensate for the brightness of the wide open aperture, I needed to raise the shutter speed. Also, when I'm shooting with high performance writers such as Jeff or any of the other guys that you see in these photos today, they are higher performance writers, so I do need to increase the shutter speed quite a bit just to make sure that I'm freezing the action. The next image that I want to talk about is this one here. This is again Micah, drop knee rider. This day was really interesting with the lighting, so it did make it very difficult to adjust my shutter speed constantly. As you can see in the background here, there's a lot of clouds. It was a lot of really dark clouds as well too. Thankfully, the sun came out for just a tiny bit in this one. I picked 1/1600th of a second just to make sure to freeze the action because he was really close to me at this spot, and I am really happy with the overall outcome of this image. The next photo that I want to take a look at is again of Jeff. This is on an epic day that we had on Maui together. One thing about this specific photo is that I was using a 2x converter. So I was shooting 600 mil plus an extra 2 times reach. So I was actually shooting at 1200 mil. Also, when you use a teleconverter, it does increase the f-stop. So I was shooting at f13, which is stopped down quite a bit. Fortunately, it was really sunny, so I didn't have to worry about that because there's plenty of light. I did shoot this at 1/1000th of a second, which did help me secure the action. Jeff is still really far away in this photo, as you can tell, but overall, I'd have to say that's a pretty darn crispy image for how far away he was and for using a 2x converter. Here's another scenario. Again, I was using a 2x converter. Very sunny, bright day, but fortunately, I was able to capture this shot. 1/1000th of a second is definitely capable of freezing action. As most of you know, Dave is a pretty high performance rider. On this day, there was tons and tons of errors happening, so it was great to be able to capture. Again, the distance was one of the problems that I had, so using the converter definitely helped me get a cropped in image. This is what it's like shooting at 1200 mil, so it does get a little hard to shoot at this focal length, but with enough practice and experience, you can definitely do it pretty easily. Finally, I want to talk about getting creative. So this particular image is at Off the Wall. Again, one of my favorite breaks to shoot at. This is Micah, drop knee rider. We've already looked at a few other images with him in it, but I shot this over 1/160th of a second. Really slow shutter speeds do not necessarily mean that you're always going to get laser focus, so I'd like to make that very clear. It's actually very difficult to shoot action sports at super slow shutter speeds, so you get a lot of misses, but when you get the one hit where it's laser focused like this one, it's a killer image. Taking a closer look at this image, you can clearly see here the rider is super in focus. You can clearly tell, however, that the wave is not in focus, so it does give that nice motion blur. So a lot of what I do is a combination of understanding the shutter speed, but also balancing in focus as well too. There are so many different scenarios that come up. For me personally, I'm using a 200 to 600 mil telephoto lens on the regular, so if you're using a slightly wider lens, it's okay. You may not necessarily need to use the same exact settings that I'm using, but hopefully this will be a good start for you. I hope this information has been helpful to you guys. If you have any questions, please make sure to leave some love in the comments down below.